Isolation is the enemy of excellence. I'm an introverted guy. I didn't understand that before, that I felt pride in going it alone, doing it myself. I can Google an article about how to tell my own story or develop a narrative. I can maybe shoot my own video. I'll figure it out. That's the enemy of excellence.
This is Create Your News, where business, branding, and relevance meet. I'm Craig Lucie, bringing you the strategies and stories to keep you ahead. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, and welcome to our Create Your News podcast. I'm Craig Lucie, and we are super excited to have our first guest, someone I've known for a couple of years, Chris Hanks. And to give you a little bit of background, he runs the Institute for Entrepreneurship. He's also the Entrepreneur in Residence for Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs. He's started different entrepreneurship programs at the University of Georgia as well as Kennesaw State University, and also run different programs and led programs at 22 different academic and corporate universities. Every time he speaks, I just want to listen, and I thought he would be a great guest for us today. So Chris, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. And thank you for that setup, because now I can just do nothing but disappoint.
No, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is really just giving people valuable information. Yeah. You and I were talking before the camera started rolling about like key takeaways. Yeah. And you're always helping entrepreneurs. And we want to talk about this first. You know, running these different programs, 22 different academic and corporate universities, you know, what sparked that passion for you to get involved?
Well, I was always I fell into entrepreneurship, not because I thought I was an entrepreneur, but just because I wasn't really fulfilled in what I was doing. My last corporate job was with Coca-Cola, and if you would have told me as a student at the University of Georgia that I would be at Coca-Cola someday, I think that was the dream job. But for some reason, I was in a bad mood about Saturday at 3 o'clock because the next day was Sunday, which meant the next day was Monday. And so it's like, there's got to be something more fulfilling. And hey, what if I did my own thing? And just following that calling and owning several small businesses. And that was about maybe, I think, creating a living and doing something that you found fun, but I didn't find meaning until I started guest speaking and teaching entrepreneurship and seeing the impact that it can have on people's lives. I really just fell in love with that.
And speaking of creating businesses, tell us about the first business that you created and what you learned from that experience.
Well, it depends on how you define first business. The business in college is just survival, like t-shirt business, delivery, service, right. Those kinds of things. So you learn how to survive and hustle. First real business was actually a franchise that I bought, which was a music store franchise. And so had music stores, and then that led to me having a recording studio, then a small entertainment business. And this is all before .com. And then the .com happened, and that's when I got a little bit more sophisticated as far as how do you raise money, how do you value businesses, those kinds of things happen really sort of like .com and after.
So how have those experiences shaped the way that you are going about teaching different entrepreneurs?
I think that we are changed through crucible experiences. Those experiences that change our sense of who we are and change our identity. And I think that learning and education should be experiential. Like, let's give them an experience. Because I used to get made fun of a lot for starting these entrepreneurship programs. It's a lot more common now. At the time it wasn't, but the idea was, well, you can't really teach entrepreneurship. It could be, but I kind of disagree, right? I can learn through experiences that change and alter who I am, right? Say, okay, well, hey, if you want to do your own thing, let me give you some steps to take. And we learn about ourselves through those steps, and maybe we become an entrepreneur, maybe we don't. I get criticized when I go into like middle schools, for example, because sometimes I think, hey, you're infusing entrepreneurship on young people. Well, that little girl who presents to me during a shrimp tank, because we call it shrimp tank, not Shark Tank because they're little, but that little girl who makes her cookies and presents, whether or not she's the next Mrs. Fields, I don't really care. But she's a better version of herself after she goes through that very difficult experience of presenting her dream, being asked hard questions from scary people like me, and seeing that change that happens within. Because one thing I've learned about entrepreneurship that I really am convicted on is that it's an inside game before it's an outside game. It's mindset over skill set. And I'd rather infuse a mindset of an entrepreneur. Let me own my position. Let me own my results. Let me own my part to play, whatever part I have, whether it's working for somebody or my own. That mindset is way more important than the skill set.
It's interesting that you mentioned Miss Fields, because we actually did a Lucie Spotlight with Debbie Fields in our bigger studio over
Why
there.
am I not surprised by that? I'm so not surprised by that. I mean, that's...
And she was fantastic. I mean, the amount of energy that she had, and she would talk about being in her store and just ask a customer just to sing happy birthday with someone's birthday. She would interview her different employees and have them sing and really like push them to get outside of their comfort zone. And then she would take her cookies and just go out on the streets and give them away, because anybody can go out and bake cookies, but how's her cookie different?
Yeah.
And also she was creating that experience.
Yeah.
And she actually was told by the closest family members, don't do this, please. And it goes back to that mindset of, no, I'm going to do this. I know in my heart, this is what I need to be doing. And I know that people are going to eat what I'm selling in her case.
I think that doubt has killed more dreams than failure ever has. People are so afraid of failure, but it's doubt is a huge enemy. Like having the guts to do what she did, right? Hey, I made this, and I'm going to bring it into the world, and I'm going to scale it, right? That's a really hard thing to do. And the doubt and the voices inside of our head or the people in our lives and people who love us will say, yeah, that doesn't seem smart, and that's not a safe thing to do. And so we tend to stay within our comfort zones, and growth is always found outside of that, right? They're almost like those invisible fences we put in our yards to keep our dogs in the yard, right? Our dreams stay small sometimes because we're not inspired by a Mrs. Fields or other entrepreneurs, which is another reason why I love to put students in front of seasoned CEOs to show them that, hey, success is not reserved for the gifted. Success is reserved for the intentional, right? The committed. And hey, that person's not that smart, or maybe not that much smarter than I am. What that person did was that person was committed and, chose courage over that fear that we have, and chose faith over that doubt.
One of my favorite quotes ever is, and you talked about, dreading going to work on Monday at Coca-Cola. Yeah. And, I had spent a lot of time in news and bouncing around in different markets. But I just kind of thought, okay, I've done this. I think it's time for my next chapter. And the quote that I love to, and I say it to my team, it's nothing changes if nothing changes. Because so many people are talking about, well, I want to do this. Here's why I want to pursue this particular business. Well, it's great. You're going to have your naysayers, but nothing will change if nothing will change. So you got to just go out and do it. But you have seen people go out, do it. Maybe they failed. Maybe they've grown it into a Fortune 500 company. What are some of the barriers that you're seeing when people are trying to get their business off the ground?
Well, I mean, there's so many, but maybe I'll start with that theme that you were just tying into, the fear of change, right? I think that's the scariest Halloween costume we could possibly have, right? Just get a t-shirt with the word change because it scares us. I don't want to change. But healthy things grow, growing things change. We have to change, right? But that's so hard because that means I have to get outside my comfort zone. I have to learn new skills. I have to work hard to do that because I've got these natural limitations that I'm struggling with. And the person who leads the $1 million venture is not the same person who could lead the $10 million venture. And so I have to become a different version of me. That's really hard. You're asking people who are growing in an aggressive growth company, you're asking people to go from nothing, to go from nothing to something, and from something to something great. That is a roller coaster of change. And that's really hard and uncomfortable, right? And so we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Hey, I'm not comfortable right now, but
I'm not either.
So, we just got to say, okay,
I'm
but let's just
comfortable having
feel
this
the fear.
conversation, but just in business in general, it's just like the constant feeling of pressure.
Yeah.
And, there's the payroll aspects of things, like we've got to continue to grow this business and get more clients and things like that. So how do you consult different entrepreneurs to really try to encourage them to get back to why they started the business? let the stress is going to come naturally with anything in life. How do you coach them to get past that?
Again, multitude of answers. One of the areas that you could start in is simplicity. Because as we grow, things get more complex. But complexity kills growth. That's why great leaders simplify. Because like if I feel like I got 100 things to do, I feel stressed. And even if they're all small things, right? Versus, hey, there's a lot of things going on, but here's the most important thing. And as long as I make progress on the most important thing that moves my business the farthest, the fastest, I'm going to sleep okay tonight. Yes, I wish I would have gotten more done, or I wish this would have gone better than it did, but at least I did this. So what if we could simplify? Because we confuse activity with accomplishment. And what's weird about entrepreneurship is you don't make much money being the doer of the thing that you do. And you think that growth means doing more. And it's not doing more. It's actually doing less, but less of the important things. CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer, not Everything Officer, right? And so every quarter, my job should get a little bit smaller than it was before. But I need to do, like with that additional time and energy, I need to focus on more important things, bigger things, things that change the business for the better more, right? Versus the fun things. Well, I used to like to go see clients. Well, maybe it's not wise for you to see every client anymore. What if you spent that time growing your business? What would that mean? What would that look like? So simplicity. In fact, Dan Sullivan says that a business can't scale until it reaches a new state of simplicity. And I like that phrase. Like, so what does simple look like for us? Because growth gets, and we tend to think growth is going to solve the problem. As we grow, well, revenue should grow, right? No, growth sucks cash. And actually, and cash flow can't keep up with revenue growth. And so that's a reason why 67% of the Inc. 5000 list 5 years ago is no longer in business, right? Growth can be dangerous. So what we need to do is simplify and focus on the important, which is a really easy thing to say and a very hard thing to do, and fire ourselves from the things that matter less, or stop being a firefighter. You know, firefighters make bad entrepreneurs. If I'm always getting up every day and fighting fires, I'm not moving the business forward. I'm not leading. I'm just putting out fires. And that'll keep that treadmill going. I'm just on this constant treadmill.
Well, that theme of simplicity can translate to so many different things. You know, we as journalists, because in our company, we focus on positive storytelling. And we always say that we want to humanize your business by creating compelling content that will resonate with your core audience. 3 questions: what are you trying to say? Who are you trying to say it to? What do you want them to do? And as trained storytellers, you know, our producers and news directors in the newsroom would always tell us the KISS rule. And KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Please just keep it simple. Because mom or dad, if they're in the kitchen cooking and the kids are running wild, they might not even be watching the story, but they're listening. So you can't have a complex story to something. But then you look at companies, let's look at Nike. They started with a running shoe, and then they expand it, and then they're Nike today, and they have apparel and everything else. How do they go from with a running shoe, which is simple, but then they're pretty complex now? What's your take on that?
Again, the problem with somebody like me who's nerdy about entrepreneurship, there's always I always want to come up with 12 answers to a simple question. So again, I got so many answers running through my head. But the idea of you dream big, you start tiny, you scale carefully. That's a Guy Kawasaki quote, right? Like so it may be just a running shoe, but I see more, right? I like that Thoreau quote, it's not what we look at, it's what we see. Is you may see just a small business in a basement, and you may see just a guy who's just, surviving paycheck to paycheck, but I see something greater. I see more impact. And so the idea that I can start small, but then I am going to be very intentional about my growth, and I have a vision. I have a picture of the future that produces passion within me.
Inflator, man, I dance with my head, I use both my hands. Inflator, man, inflator.